Hey everybody. Um, Today we are going to continue talking about aquatic ecosystems, but this time we're going to be talking about lakes and ponds. How do you think lakes and ponds are different than oceans that we talked about yesterday? Yep, lakes and ponds are not saltwater. They are freshwater. They both are. We're gonna first talk about lakes. Now, lakes and ponds are very similar, but we're gonna kind of spread them apart just to see what could be different or similar about them. So I'm sure that a lot of you have seen a lake or a pond. Um, Lakes, obviously, and ponds both have organisms that can only survive in a freshwater environment. If we took organisms out of a lake and tried to stick them in an ocean, it's not going to work because these organisms have adapted to their environment. That's the type of water and plants and other things that they depend on and that they need. So lakes and ponds both actually are surrounded by water on all sides. You usually find your plant life of lakes in the more shallow areas, and they have lots of different organisms that live there. Um, Obviously, like all organisms, lakes have biotic and abiotic um, objects living there, and they all kind of interdepend on each other. You might find fish, ducks. You may see ducks there, turtles, even beavers in your lake ecosystem. You're talking about here still water. When you look at a lake, usually you're not gonna see waves and a whole bunch of currents and things like that. It's because it's surrounded by land. There's nothing going on there to cause a whole lot of movement, and that's also important for the types of organisms that live there. If we think about ponds, most ponds overall are pretty shallow. It might be a type of pond that you could just walk all the way through because it's a shallow area. Now, just like lakes, most of the plant life is found in the shallow areas. Now, keep in mind that ponds can be natural, they can be naturally made, or they could be man-made. Now, here's something really important about ponds. They're one of the most important, they play one of the most important roles in aquatic ecosystems. Wildlife depends on them for food, shelter, and breeding. They provide much needed water for lots of different organisms. And the animals and the plants work together for survival, just like in other ecosystems. So here we're thinking about, again, very shallow water. Remember, oceans have really, really deep water, so you get a lot of diverse organisms that live in those different areas of the ocean. Here, it's all shallow. Again, they're made up of fresh water, and the plants that you may find there are things like lily pads, algae, cattail, those little like wheat looking things with the furry long thing on top. It's cattail, and water lily. There may also be some other microorganisms, those really, really small ones that you can't see. Some of the animals you may find are tadpoles, frogs, catfish, and koi fish. I know, like, we have a pond in our neighborhood, and there are those koi fish in there. You wouldn't, like, go fishing there to catch koi fish. That's not usually what you do. They're more for the looks. But, since ponds are pretty small usually, they're usually smaller than lakes, your plant life is really, really, really important to your pond. And why do you think plants are important to a pond? Because we know that plants give us oxygen. So plants produce the oxygen for these animals in that pond ecosystem to breathe. So that, you need to really keep that in mind about ponds. That's an important fact. And so one of the differences, as I said before, about ponds and lakes, are ponds are usually shallower than lakes. So if it's really shallow, you're not going to get a variety of temperature change like I told you about in the ocean. Even with lakes, there's deeper areas, so you're going to get some of that varying temperature. As you get closer to the bottom, it's going to be cooler. So what I want you to do is I want you to go through slides 6, 7, and 8. 6 is the one that this video is on. So read slides 6, 7, and 8 about lakes and ponds. On slide 8, there's a question at the bottom that says, what do you think might happen to a pond if it didn't have plants? So we talked about why plants are important. So think about what would happen to the pond if there were no plants. Let's say all the plants got taken away. What would happen to the pond? I want you to leave a voice recording just with a quick answer to that question, and then go on to slide 9. On slide 9, you will see a little reading passage. It's pretty short. It's only 2 paragraphs about oceans, lakes, and ponds. And then there are 5 questions for you to answer about oceans, lakes, and ponds. Make sure that you do your best. You can just insert a text box and type those answers in so that we can more easily read your writing. So do those 5 questions and do your very best. Make sure that you go back and find your answers in your passage. I noticed that some of you, with some of the passages from last week, you couldn't have gone back and found your answers because some of the answers were straight from there and you didn't quite get that. So make sure you're going back to find those answers in the passage. You can also use your knowledge from your head or from what I've told you now, but it's very important that you go back and use the information in the passages. So you're using some of the information that Miss Garrett and Miss Whitford have taught you in reading also when you're doing this science activity for today. So I can't wait to see what you write, and I will see you next time.